Hello, hi, good morning. Thanks for joining us here at the Oval, and well done for finding the room. Not an easy task, I don't think. The session here today, we are going to be talking about some of the global opportunities for this sector, for your sector, for the healthy aging industry, in terms of both import opportunities, export opportunities, and I hope through the conversations we will have some really interesting both ideas and barriers. You know, what are the opportunities and what are the barriers? And we've got four fantastic speakers, and I'll introduce them in a moment. But it's worth saying I work for the International Longevity Centre in the UK. We're one of 16, so we have another 15 ILCs across the world. ILC UK, we're a small organisation. Our total income is around about £1 million. But actually, even as a small organisation, we are an export business. So around half of our income comes globally. So we get funding from Pfizer, MSD, Sanofi, some of the biggest global brands in the world who tend to not be based in the UK. So we have a good, strong global links ourselves, and we've been working very closely with Linda and the team, so I'm very, very excited. Linda is here to talk about to work with both FCDO and the Department for Trade and Business, and we in particular have done work over that. In fact, I was at it sounds very nice. I was at the Ambassador's House in Portugal last week, thanks to Linda, but he didn't let me jump in the swimming pool. But we've also done events in and with colleagues in Japan, and just to give a very personal attest that actually the support that the UK government can and does give in this space is fantastic. So. In terms of the plan for today, my colleague Aaron is going to kick us off by talking a bit about the context. So ILC UK has a healthy ageing and prevention index, and Aaron's going to talk about where are the opportunities across the world. So Aaron will say a bit more about this, but it's essentially looking at, you know, of the 121 countries in our index, where might the biggest economic opportunities be? Aaron is our social, and perhaps I'll just introduce the speakers as they come up. So Aaron is our senior health research lead and has been leading our work on the index for the last few years. So without further ado, I'm going to pass to Aaron to sort of get us kicked off. Is that okay? Thank you.
Fantastic. All right. It's great to see so many of you in the room today, and I'm really delighted to be sharing some of the top-line findings of our Healthy Aging and Prevention Index, which we actually launched this year alongside the World Health Assembly. Our index essentially ranks 121 countries on 6 healthy aging metrics. We look at lifespan, health span, work span, income, environmental performance, and happiness. And the reason we look at these metrics is because it gives us a good indication as to the extent to which countries are investing in healthy aging and supporting longevity across the life course. So these are the top 50 countries on our index. I would have loved to put all 121 on here, but it was just virtually impossible to do so. But what you can see is, well, the UK actually fares pretty well, ranked 16. You can see a few countries that have the same rank here. This is intentional. Countries with the same value end up holding the same position on our index. And we actually have all EU member countries in the top 50, except for Bulgaria, which ranks 56. So what we actually see is that there are huge inequalities across our 121 countries. And the top 10 countries, if we assume that they're best adapted to longevity, they only account for 1.1, just over 1% of the world's population. So the vast majority of us are not benefiting from or living in societies that are best adapted to enabling us to live for as long and as healthy as possible. We also see that there's inequalities across some of our metrics, with over a 20-year gap in between the top and bottom 10 countries for lifespan, which is also known as life expectancy, health span, which is healthy life expectancy, and work span, which is essentially the average number of years someone's expected to be in work between the ages of 15 and 65. Alongside our index, we also rank political and economic bloc groups. And what you can see here is that Scandinavia currently leads in these groups, and the African Union is currently in the last position. Your eyes probably go straight to the EU. Here, work span is particularly low, and this is likely what's driving our skills shortages in the region. So I'm going to share a few slides with you that essentially capture what it is countries can be doing to improve their ranking on our index. So if countries spend more of their health budgets on prevention, that also improves their ranking on our index. So it's really important that countries invest in preventative health to enable people to live for longer. Things like immunization, access to screening for cardiovascular disease and cancer. We also find that, on average, countries that rank in the bottom half of the index have 4 times worse access to qualified medical doctors than those that rank in the top half of the index. Those are the top that rank at the top of the index have approximately around 40 doctors to every 10,000. Those that rank 70 or worse, this drops down to only 5 per 10,000. So huge inequalities in access here as well. But it's not all a good story for those ranking at the top of the index. Poor diet, lack of exercise is hampering progress across the board. And what we can see here is high-ranked countries are certainly facing an obesity pandemic. And what we can see is those at the end of the index, at the bottom of the index, are facing an undernourishment pandemic. And those in the middle are actually facing a double burden of both. So I'm going to leave this here. There's so much more that we've done, and I do very much encourage you to check our Prevention Index website, where you can download all the data, manipulate it, do your own analysis, and you can learn a lot more about the work that we've been doing over the last few years. And I should also mention, this conversation isn't over. This is only the first year of our index. We plan to include more data looking at more recent years. So the data we've taken here is from 2019. It's the most recent data that's available at the global level. But we're hoping to include more recent data so we can actually track change over time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Erin. And I was particularly keen to have Erin at the start, just to sort of set the context to get people thinking about, well, which countries might there be opportunities, and we can delve a bit more into some of the specifics, and you can argue about whether you think we're right as well. Interestingly, what we find is governments tend to think that they're too low on the index, where advocates in the same countries think that they're too high. There's quite an interesting sort of, when we've had debates about it. I should say there's going to be plenty of time and lots of time for discussion and questions and Q&A, so I want this to be really about you in the audience and those online, and we are going to be using Slido, so please do get questions or comments or thoughts in. I am going to pass to Eric now, who is a social entrepreneur, and I've known Eric for probably 10 years, if not more, but he's also a charity chair and chairs OpenAge, which is a London-based charity. And I suppose the thread that runs through Eric's work is a real focus around health span. So, Eric.
Thank you, David. So it was important to tell you which hat I was wearing today. I wear many hats, and so today I want to share my experience with Aging 2.0. Aging 2.0 is a global organization. We're 2,600 members in the UK. We're 40,000 globally, I got involved with Aging 2.0 because the challenges that we face are really bigger than any one individual or any one organization. We need to collaborate and work together to address the challenges that we're facing and take advantage of the opportunity. I should correct myself because it's really an opportunity, and I think that's why everyone is in this room. So I was quite struck by Patricia Moore's poem this morning about not only the poem, but she talked about creating pathways and not roadblocks. And I think that's what we try to do with Aging 2, is to create those pathways for entrepreneurs so that you can learn from what has gone before. You're not the first ones to come up with this idea. We want you to be the first ones to succeed with this idea. Wanted to share with you what we've learned. We've seen a lot, and I think through some of the presentations that I've given over the past, we've talked about design, language, and business model. Today is really more about the international opportunity and share those experiences. Most of the chapters in Aging 2.0 are in the US. It's a very different market. Growing old in the US is not a good experience, particularly if you don't have health care. I would much prefer to grow older in this country than over there. There are 11,000 people a day turning 65. They don't have a single payer system, and as a result, it creates a very different outcome and a very different experience depending on where you sit in that spectrum. The pandemic hit the UK in a different way, and it hit the US in a different way, and I think understanding those differences is quite important. So there's lots of entrepreneurs in this room who have been talking to health and social care and customers for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and not getting a lot of traction. They might have been talking to the right people, but they weren't getting a lot of traction. Some of them did a year's worth of sales in the first week, and then did it again the second week. If you were on the outside and you weren't on the right list with talking to the right people, you were on the outside looking in, so it was a very different experience. Over in the US, it was similar along the ways, except for the US began to invest in social determinants of health. So the Center for Medicare Medicaid Services created something called Z codes. And if you're interested in the US, you need to know about Z codes. Z codes are reimbursement for social determinants of health. And overnight, they created unicorns. So Papa was, the CEO was sofa surfing, almost out of money before the pandemic came. And then all of a sudden, it created a very different dynamic. So I say that because it's just a different system. And as a result, you need to treat it not as a part-time job. You need to dive into it all or nothing. And by that, I don't mean leaving here, create exports for us. We've invested you as a government in terms of the projects, but as a market, it's not for part-time. Some people have called the US a graveyard for British entrepreneurial ambitions. And those are for the people who treat it part-time. And so what I want you to think about is one example. I met an entrepreneur yesterday who we hosted at Aging 2.0 annual conference in Kentucky, introduced him to a lot of the folks. He actually lives over there. The company's still based here, but one of the employees is based over there. He now has networked his way onto the AARP Collaborative, which is a network set up to support entrepreneurs get market traction. And as a result of that, they now have trials, and they have investors and traction in the US, versus another company who we introduced, sort of treated it as a part-time, long-distance thing, and they're nowhere. They've given up on the US market. And so I think there are a couple of things that I want you to make sure that you think about, which is that give yourself time, at least a year in advance of when you actually want to get serious. Showing up and saying, I'm here, buy my product, doesn't work. Invest at least 12 months in advance before you want to really have any serious conversation. Work with local partners, and that could be as simple as an accelerator. They used AARP. There are others. There's one called Leading Age. Nick A. here in the UK has partners over in the US, so they can do research for you over there. Leading Age, US Aging, and AARP are 3 associations. Accelerators, incubators include Techstars, Thrive, CABI, Age Tech Collaborative, and AARP Innovation Lab. So leverage those particular local partners. And there's always advisors. I can introduce you to Mary Furlong Associates or other associates that are more than happy to help you work your way through those channels. Corporation, and when you get into those channels are really dynamic. It's a big market. So those are the 3 things that I wanted to leave you with sort of practically as an entrepreneur. If you want to talk more, I'm more than happy to do so afterwards. But yeah, I think, you know, David, to your point, it's an international opportunity. When we created the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund, the idea was to create exports. So go get them.
Thanks, Eric. And you may have noticed that I think the US comes in the mid-30s on our index, and the US is not in a good place in this space. So that you might say this is a good opportunity, actually. So of course, life expectancy in the US is being significantly hit by opioids and guns. 2 things you wouldn't expect rich countries to be hit by, and actually to the extent that there are southern states in the US that have lower life expectancy than Bangladesh now. So you have very, very significant challenges in the US. But there is an opportunity there, and actually, interestingly, sort of, you know, I was at an event with Jeremy Hunt recently, and he was talking about actually the real opportunity for UK businesses in the US, because actually American businesses like working with UK businesses, so there really is an opportunity there still. Let me now pass to Mandy Dixon, who is from the Northern Health Science Alliance. Mandy's going to talk a bit about an experience she had running one of the Innovate programs around, which was a UK-Canada exchange initiative around health tech, age tech, and she's going to talk from the context of, you know, give you a few tips about which of the, you know, why the organisations that got involved were selected. Mandy, the Northern Health Science Alliance is a sort of coalition of universities and other northern organisations interested in the space, and Mandy also leads the Healthy Ageing and Mental Health Network as part of that. So, Mandy, thank you.
Thanks, David. Good to be here. So as David mentioned, I'm Mandy Dixon, and I work for the Northern Health Science Alliance, or the NHSA, which is another acronym that is very similar to some of the others. I am I lead on our corporate engagement and our cluster development, but I also lead our healthy aging program. So just a very little bit about the NHSA. So we're a northern partnership of 10 universities and 9 NHS trusts across the north of England. And we basically promote and advocate the northern assets, both nationally and internationally, many of which are around healthy aging, which I think Linda might mention around the 2 DBT HPOs in the north of England. We also have a strong convening function, so we convene about 11 networks across the north, and one of those is the Healthy Aging Network. And through the Healthy Aging Network, we've worked with a number of Canadian organisations for many years and have universities on our network. And we convened a consortia of partners, brought them together and developed a project that was funded by the UKRI Healthy Aging Challenge. Quite an unusual project, I think, for them, but hopefully it has proven to be a useful model for future projects. And this was the UK-Canada Age Tech Innovation Exchange. So the consortia that we brought together included the Department for Business and Trade, so Linda was on our steering group, We then had the 4 Northern Health Innovation Networks, or Academic Health Science Networks, or AHSNs, or the acronyms as they were previously known. So they focus on adoption into the NHS. And then we had 2 Canadian organisations as partners, and they were CABI, which is the Centre for Ageing and Brain Health Innovation, and then AgeWell, which is an extensive network around ageing and technology and innovation in Canada. And as you will have seen from the index earlier, so Canada is number 11, I think it is, so pretty high up there. And just referring to Eric's work as well, you know, it's often seen as quite a useful stepping stone to the US market. So we have really strong connections to Canada, and this project was about developing introductions to those 2 ecosystems. So what we did was we ran an international competition open to both UK and Canadian companies working in the age tech space, quite broadly defined, and through quite a rigorous selection review process, we identified 8 UK companies and 5 Canadian companies that would take part in an actual in-person exchange program. And then we also identified just under about 50 companies to be part of a virtual information exchange program. So the 2 exchanges that were held in June this year, so quite recently. So we took over the 8 companies to Toronto for a week of support programs and intense introductions into the ecosystem there. And then we also attended a big collision event as well and had the opportunity to meet with investors, etc. And then we also brought over the 5 Canadian companies for a week-long program in the UK, and that was focused on Manchester and the northeast, Newcastle, again, those 2 high potential areas around ageing. And we aligned that with the NHS Confederation and a number of introductions and events and sessions around that. So we do actually have some of the companies who came over with us in the room today, and they've certainly been present yesterday as well. So you know, it might be that you might want, if you're interested in the Canadian market, you might want to speak to some of them. I'm sure they wouldn't mind. So I think Diana's from GateSmart. Diana's got her hand up. I don't know if anyone else is, but no, I can certainly make introductions if you're interested. So this happened in June. And already we've seen really tangible benefits for these companies. And we have a number of companies who are, have started trials in Canada already, who are having their products marketed in Canada. We've had some of the Canadian companies in receipt of government funding to undertake pilots back in the UK. So I think there's also that exchange, so it works both ways as well. And I think just to, I don't want to go on and give you more details, but just to focus on, I think, some of the learnings from it, I think, is, I think one of the things that we found that companies don't necessarily fully understand when embarking on this journey is that need for evidence of their own product's effectiveness and so on. I think that is something that certainly the companies that were selected had been through that process and had taken that quite seriously and had the evidence of effectiveness within the UK at least, and also having some evidence of the product being in use, I think really helped in terms of having those Canadian conversations. I think the other piece of advice, which picks up on Eric's as well, is around the need to work with the ecosystem. So, for example, in Canada, AgeWell and CABI are really embedded in the health ecosystem very, very well connected. And, you know, you can save, I think, months, if not years of your journey by working through accelerators like the one we ran, but also just working directly with those organizations rather than trying to target, buyers directly. I think that's, and certainly we're happy to have that discussion with you and make any further introductions. So I think I'll leave it there. Happy to have any further conversations. But that exchange program has proven really beneficial to the companies, I think, on both sides, and to the organizations. We now have this really strong international network that we can build on, and that's thanks to the Healthy Aging Challenge. Many thanks for their support, and to DBT. And happy to speak to you afterwards. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And just a reminder, we're doing questions via Slido afterwards. Manchester, the Northern Britain, there's huge opportunity in this space. So back in 2020, we did some work with GMCA, which showed that the combined spending power of Greater Manchester's households aged over 65 is increasing by 280 million every year. But that actually in Greater Manchester, households aged over 65 are currently saving 1.8 billion a year. So people have a lot of money, they're saving it. And actually we also found that if we made Greater Manchester's town more accessible and appealing to older consumers, there'd be a £50 million boost each year. So there's significant, and that's just Manchester. That's not the rest of Northern Britain. Let me now pass on to Linda, who is the specialist at the Department for Business and Trade in the Life Sciences team, very much focused on health innovation and the NHS. Linda's role is working with networks and partners, including UKRI, in relation to both inward investment and trade. And before her current job, worked in the sort of medtech and university sector, so may well have been sort of doing very similar things to what some of you in the room are doing. Let me pass over to Linda to talk, and I think build on some of the tips we've had so far. But thanks, Linda.
Oh, thank you very much, David. It's a great pleasure to be here today. My name has been mentioned by a couple of my previous speakers, and I will say on behalf of the team and Department of Business and Trade, thank you. We enjoy working with all our partners, not least UKRI, with ILC, Eric mentioned NICA, the National Innovation Centre for Ageing, and other partners. So that's a big part of the work that we do, is to work with our partners, support them and leverage what they can do. So Department for Business and Trade, some of you may be thinking, oh, is it Department for International Trade? That's what we were. But then after formation of the departments earlier in the year, we took in some more of the business-facing groups from another department. So we're really there bringing business and trade together in a single department. And what I'm going to talk about is very practical support focused. And if I forget to say it later in the session, all of the things I'm going to mention about the support from DBT can be found on www.great.gov.uk. So I'll just get that one in. We're here to support investment into the UK to help businesses grow, to unlock export potential and open up new markets, for example, through trade deals. And we're looking to join up all of our offers of support in an integrated way to help businesses from the very smallest through to the largest in operating both here in the UK, but also abroad. I work with an international network. We have presence in more than 100 markets and reach out to 170. So it's really a strong network. Sadly, I wasn't with David in the ambassador's residence in Portugal, but I'm so glad he had a good time there. But that sort of thing where we can hold events, or we might get an ambassador to come and say something. it may not sound very much in some senses, but it really can help bring the networks together and be a way of bringing important buyers into a room together with you as providers of services and products. So we are home to a world-class healthcare and life sciences ecosystem. It doesn't mean it's 10 out of 10 in every section, but we still do rank very, very highly on the world stage. We, as a country, as all of you in this room, we recognise the challenges and opportunities of an ageing population, and we're all harnessing our ecosystem towards solutions. And that's part of what we do to present the UK as a place to invest in and to look at the businesses we have, and then also, of course, to promote the businesses and organisations we have outward to the world. One of the things working with partners such as David and UKRI, George McGuinness and his team, is that I sit in the Healthcare and Life Sciences team within DBT. So our focus is particularly around products and services that relate to medtech, diagnostics, genomics, assistive technology. In fact, I think it's probably yesterday, maybe today, a lot of my colleagues are in Medica. Many of you will be aware this is one of the biggest selling opportunities, conferences and exhibitions for the medtech industry, and have just launched the assistive technology offer. So some of the companies that we've worked with, the UKRI, are now featured in that offer. More on the biopharma side, it would include vaccine companies, and I think, Aaron, you mentioned about, lifelong vaccination and immunisation is very important for prolonging health as we grow older. So that's one of the things that we do. We have a number of events. We will attend and have presence at some of the larger events, such as Arab Health. Many of you may have heard of that. That tends to happen at the beginning of the year over in Dubai. Medica, I've just mentioned. We have Bio in the summer. Advamed's just gone over in the States. So a number of these big opportunities to promote the UK, but also to take with us delegates of companies who can perhaps demonstrate their services and goods and have the opportunities again to network with key influencers and decision makers in those countries. Mandy mentioned that we were very happy to support the work she and her team were doing with the UKRI-funded UK-Canada Age Tech Innovation Exchange. We've also worked with Nika, who led on a accelerator to look at the China market, not necessarily the one you might choose if you're new to exporting, but we contributed to that and brought in colleagues from our team in China and also colleagues from the Intellectual Property Office in China, because that's a very important topic for many companies there. So the other thing to say is that for the Department of Business and Trade, there's a whole raft of support out there for companies across all of the sectors. I would highlight in particular, we have the export service, and there are a number of guides and templates that you can get. For example, how to write an export plan, and there's a template there. There's a service that if you can't find the answer to your questions on first looking, the service can respond to specific questions through an online service. We also have UK finance, and that's very important because that helps to, for example, there's particular financing opportunities for your potential buyers, if that's what they need. There's support for you as a producer, for example, if you're producing a product, to make sure that there are competitive loan and financing systems for you to make sure you can complete your orders. There's insurance for default on buyers paying you, and that might be particularly important in some markets. But I would say look up UKEF and make sure that you get in contact with them if you have those concerns before you sign any contracts. Very, very important. But they are there to help across all sectors, companies from the very smallest to the very largest. And the other thing would be the Export Academy, where there are online modules for those who are just sort of thinking about starting out to export. There's also masterclasses that delve down more into sectors, and then there's some very specific market engagement opportunities. And we also have a cohort of international trade advisors, tend to deal with companies who are exporting beyond, have a turnover beyond the $500,000 mark, but for innovative companies with lots of growth potential, exceptions can be made to link you with an international trade advisor, and we have sector-specific trade advisors. So just want to say that. I also appreciate that for some of you in the room and the wider conference, it's not all about something which we would identify as health tech or life sciences, but of course, what I've talked about in terms of this general support is available to all, and we do have other sector teams who may be relevant to you. So last thing, a couple of adverts. Firstly, the Made in UK Awards 2024 is now open for business. If you're interested in that, please do have a look on that website. The closing date, I think, is around the 12th of January. And the other thing is, and this was an accelerator I don't think Eric mentioned, but we have a long-term Texas UK BioBridge programme under DBT, and Innovate UK, through their Innovate Edge programme, have funded last year a cohort of 16 UK companies to go over to their accelerator programme, which is immersive for America, but they're in Texas. And it's just open for applications now for the 224 cohort. But again, I think the closing date's the middle of January sometime. So if you're interested in that, have a look. That's it from me. Thank you, David.
Thank you. And can I perhaps ask the panel to come to the table, come to their chairs over here? Thanks so much. And please do put any questions or comments into the Q&A. We've got a few so far, and I should say in terms of our Portugal event, and I say sadly didn't involve swimming, but interestingly we had, of the 15 or so people in the room, and it was deliberately small, we had a new connection from a big pharmaceutical company and from a big financial services company, which we wouldn't have got if it wasn't for the ambassador managing to have the pulling power and get them in the room. So that sort of support is extraordinarily useful. And I should also say ILC UK, and I saw Martin Halliwell has put a comment in the Q&A about being involved with the Columbia Center at USA, so in the US. So ILC US is based in the Columbia Center, in the Robert Butler Center. So we have a network across the world of people. So even if we don't know people, we know people who know people. So please feel free to get in touch with us, and we can point you towards people who know what's going on in certain countries. Probably not as well and as authoritatively as Linda and her colleagues, but actually we can give you a bit of insight and some connections as well. There is a question, I think, from Andrew, and I'm going to kick off from this. Andrew Larpent from Common Age, who says, in Brunei, the more steps you do daily, the more you qualify for business discounts on products and services. Are there any other examples? So I just wonder if there's perhaps broadening out sort of the strategic approach taken by different countries to encourage sort of older consumers and healthy aging. Are you aware of things going on in other countries? Eric?
Stephen McPeak in the room? No. So there's an entrepreneur in Belgium, Northern Ireland. I was just talking to an entrepreneur from Belgium earlier, so I got Belgium on my mind. Stephen McPeak in Belfast has done something that has created a solution that encourages people to be physically active in local green spaces. That was actually one of the Innovate UK award-winning solutions. And So I think, there's examples like that are in the portfolio. There are some examples that are not in the portfolio. I think people have talked about things like Sweatcoin and things like that where you can earn. There's another one called, I think, Better Points. I think I saw them around. Essentially, what I find interesting about that is that it's not necessarily a financial incentive for people to get out and exercise. In Ebbsfleet, they ran a trial with Better Points, and they found that people would exercise. They actually found it more beneficial to donate the points to charity. So if there was points that you got at Tesco, that someone would do a jog around the park, and then they would donate that to the local charity. And they found that more rewarding than getting £5.
Does anyone else want to come in on that one? Go on, Linda, go on.
It's not the reward system, but I think as you and your team will be very familiar with from the work you've done in Japan, obviously for the large companies, there's some very strong programs to help keep employees healthy, and they get reminded every year if their waste measurement has increased or something like that. And then they're given advice and help to try and reduce weight, get more exercise. But I think culturally, they don't see this as a sort of nanny state type of thing. They see it as the company supporting them to stay healthy in old age.
Definitely. And just to say, I think so it's really interesting. So clearly, on the sort of slightly broader space, the UAE, for example, now has a 50-year plan. And I think it's worth looking at sort of initiatives like that go beyond aging. So does Singapore has a long-term plan, which includes demographics. If you're looking specifically about aging, China has a 5-year plan specifically focused on care. There are sort of opportunities in relation to that, and Japan has a plan. So I think that also in terms of rather than the specific, there are examples across the world of governments starting to strategically plan for aging. Japan is a really interesting one though. So since 2000, when the government, they didn't mandate, but they basically started to say, Japan was the first in 2000 to say, look, you all need to do 10,000 steps a day. Since then, every year the number of steps has fallen. Which says a lot about the ability of governments to influence us. I'm going to bring Eric back in, but just to say in terms of Stephen, who Eric mentioned, who has a Civic Dollars program, is speaking at our Future of Aging conference on the 7th of December. So please join us for that. Eric.
That wasn't intentional.
No.
Yes, it was a good segue.
Good plug.
There's one way to think of international markets as an export market, but it also might be an R&D market. And I look outside of the health and care system as, if you look at payments on your phone today, it's quite common to use this to make a payment. Well, M-Pesa in Kenya was extremely popular, and it was a way of banking the unbanked. And so I think as an R&D market, it's quite interesting. I was at Sir John Bell's presentation over at RSA last night, and he was talking about using some of, he's doing a program called One Shot, and they're testing it in Rwanda of all places. So, not only is it an export market, think of some of these places as a way of doing R&D.
So, really good point. We got a question from Mark Glover, and I might start with Linda in terms of this. Is UK funding available to reconfigure UK-centric products to other markets?
There was some funding a couple of years back, which I think might have come from Innovate, and that was to help UK companies with regulations and IP patent type things. I don't think that funding has been renewed, sadly. Yeah. So at this point, I could be wrong, but I don't think there's anything specifically about reconfiguring products. But I can take that away and have a look.
Does anyone else want to come in on that? Okay. It's clearly a really interesting one in terms of sort of the challenges, I guess, for industry who want to. But one thing I would say in the conversations we've had globally is, as much as an organisation really interested in pushing the Overton window a bit in this space, one thing that's worth recognising is the UK does pretty well, in this space. And we might, 17th in the world is not bad. We could be higher, but actually we are seen from a global perspective as being pretty influential in this space. So it is worth sort of, and I think that does hold some weight. We have some advice from someone anonymous saying the best advice to an early stage startup developing technologies. It is a question. What's the best advice to early stage startup developing technologies for healthy aging in strategizing for routes to market? And Eric, do you want to sort of kick off with that?
Yeah, wow, okay. Horses for courses, unfortunately, is, I think, probably, not sure what particular market it is. I mean, I think one of the things that the UK is better at than I think anywhere else in the world is user-centered design. If you look at Apple, which changed the world in terms of products, they came to the UK to get their designer. And so think of your user and user-centered design process. There is a way. I was just talking to an entrepreneur literally just before this session, and he was asking me, how do I engage with older adults to get involved in the innovation of their particular product? And he had 4 questions, and I'm like, whoa, think of one and be very specific about the kinds of questions. So I think there's a lot of research to be done in advance of engaging with individuals, but start with the user and the user needs, and it's hard to go wrong from that perspective. But you always need to focus on who pays, but you need to figure out what the particular need is. And I'll give a really good example of that. One of the products that people talk about are the Internet of Things, and I'm going to do remote patient monitoring, or I'm going to help the individual live in their own home for better, and I'm going to sell this, and the adult children are going to pay for this. What we found actually is that I couldn't give this stuff for free to my parents. They're like, I don't want it. I don't want my activities on the internet. There was all sorts of resistance to it. But if you turned it around, one of the other companies here in the UK, and I can't think of their name at the moment, but what they were very successful at is someone wanted to live in their own home for as long as possible, and they would use any product or service to help them get there. And they didn't want to share it with their children, but if it helped them. So turn it around, and how do you help that particular individual?
Great, thanks. Linda?
Apart from reiterating the sort of plethora of services and sort of starting to help you think about your market, what your market opportunity is that I mentioned earlier, I think just something that might add to what Eric was saying. So we mentioned Nika, they have voice. And so they've got now their international chapters as well as the chapters that you have in Aging 2.0. I think they've got one in Singapore now. I think they were developing one in China, I think some of the European countries. So they're looking to gather those user groups, those informed users, to explore the opportunities in that particular country for a given product or service.
Great, thanks. We've got a couple more minutes, so I'm just going to ask the panel for sort of any final reflections or tips or thoughts, and ask each of them to say something. But whilst I'm giving them a few seconds to think of something, of their contribution, just to add as well, another of the UKRI government initiatives that has been supported over the last few years has been the Design Age Institute, and which is hosted by the Helen Hamlin Centre, who some of you know now. The Helen Hamlin Centre, 40 years ago, in effect, created, I'm probably bigging them up too much, but essentially inclusive design came from the Helen Hamlin Centre 40 years ago, and the UK really has led the world in that space. So it is worth recognising that as well. So let me pass to my colleagues for some final comments. So Aaron, any final thoughts from you or comments or?
Yeah. Just a couple points, I guess, to talk a little bit just about the index. And I think one of the key things about the index is really to have conversations at the global, regional, and national level with countries to understand where they could be doing better and how we can help. It's worth mentioning that this index is relative. So even those at the top of the index, there are improvements that can be made. Switzerland ranks #1, but there are things that that country can still do to improve and support and invest in healthy aging. But we also want to understand what it is that they're doing and why they're ranking so high. When we launched the index, we had the Canadian Health Minister comment on the fact that they were ranked 11th. And the first thing that she said was, it's great that we're on the index, it's great that we're high, but we want to be in the top 10. So even countries at the top of the index are looking at ways to improve their rankings. So I'm hoping that this can be a conversation or I hope this tool can be a conversation to engage with ministers, with stakeholders that work not only in health, but sort of across the healthcare ecosystem to identify what they can do to invest in healthy aging.
Great, thank you. Mandy?
Thank you. I suppose, just reflecting on the value of some of the accelerator programs like the one that we were able to run has been, I think, very helpful for the companies, and the value of working with innovation networks, and through those innovation networks rather than with individual organizations, I think is probably worth just mentioning. And I think in terms of the previous points, I think there is also something about companies having who want to embark on this journey, sort of having the necessary evidence that they need to do it. I think you can't start with nothing. I think you have to. There is a pre-journey, I think, before your export journey, and I think engaging with some of these innovation networks and the organisations, very early on that process is helpful. So hopefully we will be able to repeat some of these opportunities for companies, because I think there have been really tangible benefits, and I think they really support the process, which can be quite arduous, I think, for companies. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Eric? Yeah. Thank you.
So I guess the thing that I want to leave with everyone is that I think entrepreneurs and people in this room, we have world-leading solutions. We are really good at this stuff. Mm-hmm. What we're not good at is scaling it. We have world-beating ideas. We just need to get them to market. That is where I think we have a real challenge, and that was what I was trying to share on stage in terms of the kinds of things to plug into existing infrastructure to get you to scale. You need distribution, you need brand, you've got great ideas. Just plug into the networks.
Great, thank you, Eric. And finally, Linda?
Well, I agree wholeheartedly with what Eric's just said, and really just another plug to say there's a lot of free advice and support there on the DBT website. There's experts, as we have on the rest of the panel, and if you want to either start your export journey or expand your export journey, we are here to help you.
Brilliant, a really good message to finish with. I'm very conscious of lunch and time, so the panel I guess will be here for a little bit, so please do come and grab us if you want more. From ILC's perspective, for example, we run events all over the world. If we're always interested in supporting people like you to get into the room with key decision makers, so please do let us know if there are ways we can collaborate. So thank you very much, and enjoy lunch.